What is up, you guys? The 2023 FIBA World Cup is about to begin. It is less than a week away. You've probably been watching all the tune-up games or at least seeing the highlights. And it is time for the actual tournament that everyone's been preparing for. Today, what I wanted to do was break down every single team from number 32 all the way to number 1 in my own pre-tournament rankings. Please understand that this is not necessarily how I think they will all finish in actual order, first through 32nd place, because this is a power rankings. The teams do not all play each other, therefore some teams will have a tougher schedule and will finish with a lower ranking than another. That's just how it goes with these tournaments. So without any further ado, let us get going. I would say overall the FIBA tournament is broken into 3 categories. The first category that we're going to be going through are the countries that are just happy to be here. Finishing 32nd, I have Venezuela. Venezuela doesn't have any NBA talent. That's probably not much of a shocker. They don't really have much FIBA European talent. They have one dude who plays in the NBA Academy in Australia. Venezuela has been getting shellacked in every single tune-up game they've played. Now, they're not a terrible team. Obviously, they made it this far. Argentina didn't even qualify for this tournament, and Argentina typically is a pretty highly respected America's team, so you have to give Venezuela some credit for at least getting here, but that's as far as they're getting, is here. Finishing 31st, we have Cape Verde. I believe this is the smallest country to ever qualify for this tournament, so it's kind of cool. They have one NBA experienced player on their roster, although he's a bit of an older guy now. It's Willie or Eddie Tavares. He's a 7'2" dude. He's pretty big, although he doesn't really necessarily do a whole lot at this point. Cape Verde only played 2 tune-up games, and I think that has to do with the lack of financial resources available to their national team. They probably just couldn't afford going to other tournaments for preparation for the FIBA World Cup. Still, though, I like Cape Verde's team. I like their country. I think they're going to do better than Venezuela at the bare minimum. Finishing 30th, we have Angola, a typical powerhouse of the African continent. They have a lot of dudes who play within their own domestic league, which isn't a terrible league. They also have Bruno Fernando, who is an NBA experienced player. He's a bit of an undersized center, but on the FIBA game, I think he'll be just fine. Finishing 29th, we have Ivory Coast, another African team that just doesn't necessarily have a lot of high-end talent, but they're a team that has a lot of experience playing with each other, as it's pretty much the same roster that's competing in all of the FIBA qualifier games in the summers every year. Finishing 28th, we have Mexico, one of the largest countries on the planet. Not that good at basketball, though, and that's fine. I mean, look at India. Mexico, they have some dudes who have experience playing in Europe, but they don't have any NBA talent on their team, and that's just the reality of the country. I grew up really close to Mexico, and I lived in a community that was about 75% Mexican, and I can just tell you from my experience, the most popular sports in Mexico are baseball and soccer, and basketball's not at the very bottom, but it's not that high up on the list, so it's cool that Mexico made it this far. Finishing 27th, we have Jordan. Jordan and most Middle Eastern countries that most people can't find on a map if you gave them $1 to try. They're a lot better at basketball than I think people give them credit, but Jordan just doesn't necessarily have enough high-end talent. I think they play well as a team against other small countries, but you put them up against a team like Canada, and they're going to get absolutely embarrassed, unfortunately. Finishing 26th, we have South Sudan. I believe this is the youngest country on the planet, although it depends on your definition of a country, I understand that. South Sudan has 2 NBA players, in Carlick Jones at point guard and Wenyan Gabriel at center, which is a very useful duo of players to have as your best players. Sudan is characterized by a lot of length and a lot of athleticism, so I think those games are going to be pretty entertaining to watch. Finishing at 25th, we have Puerto Rico. A bit of a disappointing ranking for Puerto Rico because they have NBA talent available, but like Jose Alvarado, who is probably their country's best player, he fractured his leg at the end of last NBA season, so unfortunately and not surprisingly, he's not available for this tournament. I remember they lost to the United States in a tune-up game that really wasn't close, and I remember thinking, it's basically 50 states versus 1, and that is basically what it is. Puerto Rico isn't really a country, but it's cool that they at least qualified for the tournament. Again, they made it over Argentina. Think about that. Finishing 24th, we have Egypt. The African continent has a very wide variety of different national teams. It's something that I don't think a lot of people realize. They have some countries that are characterized by extreme athleticism, but then you have countries like Egypt that are not. They don't have that. They have very skilled players, very stuck to the ground players. Yet Egypt's good. Really, Egypt is a good team. Another team that they don't necessarily have a lot of international talent, but they hold their own on the international stage pretty well. At 23, we're going to Iran. I think Iran is one of the most underrated Middle Eastern teams on the planet. One of the most underrated countries for basketball on the planet. Hamed Haddadi might be a Hall of Famer when it is all said and done. He played in the NBA briefly, but has absolutely been tearing up the Chinese Basketball Association for years now. The dude is the Nikola Jokic of the Middle East. He is fun to watch, although now he's like 40 years old, so he's not doing what he used to do. And the rest of the Iranian national team isn't really as special. They're mostly, again, guys who play within their own domestic league. Finishing 22nd, we have Lebanon. Lebanon is another country that kind of follows the same mold. They don't have the high-end talent of Haddadi, but I'd say as a general trend, they're a little bit better, more consistently better than Iran. I wish I had more to say about Lebanon and most of these lower ranking teams, but unfortunately I do not. So at this point, I'd say we are officially leaving the bottom tier of the tournament, the countries who were just happy to be here, and we are now entering the seed, or the ranking, the tier of teams that would like to do something but aren't really expected to do anything. So coming in at number 21, we have one of the host nation, the Philippines. A kind of disappointing ranking for the Philippines. When I was sitting down preparing this, I really thought they were going to be a lot higher. But as I went through their roster, as I watched their tune-up games, I'm just not impressed with what I'm seeing. They have a lot of guys who could bring this team up. Kai Sotto is probably the most well-known. He's a legitimate NBA talent prospect who's just never had the shot of playing in the league yet because there's a whole long story to that, but he's a good player. But then they also have Jordan Clarkson. Jordan Clarkson's amazing. Like, he's going to score 25 plus a game in every single game, and he's going to lead the Philippines to a lot of very entertaining games. But are they going to win those games? I just don't think so. Coming in at 20th, we have Greece. So Greece fell very, very steeply as the summer went on because they initially entered the summer with the hopes of Giannis Antetokounmpo leading the way and Kostas and Thanasis kind of being the little backups. My cat's crying. Their normal starting point guard, Nick Kalathis, is also not competing this summer. So the team that we all know and love just isn't quite there. But they're still not a bad team. Like, Greece is not a terrible team. They're just not nearly as good as they potentially could have been. I have them at 20th for a reason. Finishing 19th, we have New Zealand. New Zealand, they're just a very small country. They have a lot of national pride. They have a decently respected domestic league, and their best players go on to the NBL, the Australian League, which has actually skyrocketed in international competitiveness over the years. But New Zealand, their national team just is pretty weak still. I wish Steven Adams would put his grudge aside and actually play for them. That would boost them up significantly, but unfortunately that's just not the reality we live in. New Zealand, I respect their team, but they're just not really that good. Coming in at 18th, we have China. China used to be a powerhouse in basketball, but they've really fallen off. They have a lot of dudes who have flirted with the NBA, like Cho Ki is probably the most well-known. Kyle Anderson sold his soul and now competes for China, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, I'm not overly impressed with the Chinese national team this year, but they're not terrible. I think Kyle Anderson is going to be a good, like, point forward / honestly coach for them. Like, he's going to help orchestrate their offense and try to get them the most easy shots as they can as they try to compete and get into, like, the knockout stage of the tournament. Coming in at 17th, I have Montenegro. Another very, very tiny country, but my goodness, they are competitive. They are led by Nikola Vucevic, who's just a tank. He's a monster on the FIBA stage. But they also have, oh gosh, I want to make sure I say his name right. Hold on one second here. Okay, I don't know the first name, but Simonovic. He is a guy who has played in the NBA a little bit. Now he's playing overseas in Europe. They have dudes who can hang. They're a small country, but my goodness, Montenegro is a good country when it comes to basketball, so I think they're going to make a little bit of noise. Coming in at 16th, the Dominican Republic. They were higher up earlier in the summer when there was still the opportunity of Chris Duarte and Al Horford playing for them. Unfortunately, those two guys, for whatever reason, have backed out. But they still have Karl Anthony Towns, who's one of the NBA's best centers. Like, he could average 28 points, 14 rebounds, 3 blocks a game throughout this tournament. He's going to be an absolute monster out there, and he's going to be a problem for most of these international centers. I think the Dominican Republic has the potential of doing a lot, but beyond Towns, there's just too much of a fall off for me to put them in the highest tier of this tournament. Finishing at 15th, I'm going with Georgia, another country of the Middle Eastern world, although it's technically Europe, but it's also technically the Middle East that people can't find on a map. Georgia is a much better country in basketball than you probably realize. The most famous dude is obviously Zaza Pachulia, but Goga Bitadze is a good player. And then they have the dude with the longest name you can ever try, Mamu Kalash something. He's also got some NBA experience. Like, this is a good, or maybe he's entering the NBA, I don't remember. They have dudes who can hang, and they've been pretty competitive in their tune-up games. It's actually been surprising. I've ranked them higher than I thought I was going to rank them. And also teams falling like Greece, the Philippines, and Dominican Republic kind of boosted Georgia a little bit. So I have them up at over the midway point, so good for them. Finishing 14th, we have Latvia. Latvia is a country that I am very surprised with how high I have them ranked, considering Kristaps Porzingis is not playing. But they've just been playing so well in their tune-up games that I can't ignore it. Like, they have won all their tune-up games against respectable competition, and their best player is Davis Bertans. Now, they also have Pasekniks, who has experience, and Rodions Kurics, who has NBA experience, so it's not just... Also, Darius Bertans, the brother of Davis Bertans, is on this team. Like, they have a lot of dudes who can hang. Latvia, I don't know if they're just kind of playing really, really hot right now in its tune-up games, therefore their opponents aren't necessarily going all out. Like, I believe when they played Finland, Markkanen didn't even play in that game, so maybe we're getting skewed results that aren't indicative of what's actually going to happen in the tournament. But still, I'm going to rank them at 14. I think that they're playing really well, and I don't see why the trends can't carry over into the tournament. Finishing 13th, I'm going Japan. That might be a bit high for some people, but I've kind of fallen in love with the Japanese national team. As the last video I made on this channel was about a young point guard they have named Yuki Kawamura, and while doing research on him, I just learned a lot about Japanese basketball, and I respect the team a lot. The Phoenix Suns added Yuta Watanabe, which, by the way, it's pronounced Watanabe, not Watanabe. In Japan, you don't emphasize any parts of a name. It's all the same level as you say it, so it's just Watanabe. But they also have Togashi, they have Tominaga, Yode Baba, and then Hawkinson, who's a white guy. Like, they have a lot of dudes who can play really, really well together. The B League is definitely on the rise. It's unfortunate that Rui Hachimura is not playing in this tournament, but it is what it is. I think Japan, they're in the toughest opening division. They have to go up against Australia, Finland, and Germany in the group stage, which is just absolutely brutal. I haven't even said any of those teams yet. Meanwhile, the United States has Jordan, Greece, which is like a fraction of Greece, and New Zealand. So just to give you an idea of how unfair these pool play groups are, but it's just how it goes, the luck of the draw. Finishing 12th, we have Serbia. So a lot of people wrote off Serbia after it was revealed that Nikola Jokic was not going to participate in the tournament, but I think we all need to come back to them at this point because they have a lot of really good talent on their team. They're led by Bogdan Bogdanovic, who's going to... He's a stud on the FIBA stage, so I think he's going to be really good. They also have a newcomer to the NBA named Petrusev. He's someone you need to pay attention to. He's a big man, and he can play. Then they also have Nikola Jovic of the Miami Heat. He has NBA experience, so he can probably play. I think Serbia is a very decked out team. Their EuroLeague talent is also top tier, so watch out for Serbia, even without Nikola Jokic, who's resting because hopefully, you know, he has another deep playoff run ahead of him. Plus, the Olympics next year. So we can get into the topic of FIBA running the World Cup the year before the Olympics another time. It's a stupid thing, but whatever. Finishing 11th, we have Italy. So Italy, I'm a bit surprised with my placing of Italy. I had them initially pretty high. Like, I had them closer to 1. But as the summer went on, I had them falling away from 1 because more and more guys were backing out of the tournament. But at the end of it all, I have them at number, what is it, 10? 11? What do I have them at? I have them at 11. They are led by Fontecchio, who plays in the NBA. They also have Nicola Melli, you probably remember him, and Luigi Tatomo, who you probably remember. Now, they don't have guys like Danilo Gallinari, they don't have Nico Mannion, but still, the Italian national team in their tune-up games has just looked so sharp. Like, I am very blown away, I'm very impressed. I think they're gonna make some noise in this tournament. I don't quite have them in the very top tier, but they're very, very close. Like, these are the teams who I think could make some noise. If, you know, if just some stuff happens, it wouldn't shock me if these teams get to the final 8, but they're just not quite there. Finishing 10th, we have Finland. It is the Lauri Markkanen show. It's one of the most impressive national team rises I've ever seen, because Finland for the longest time was just nothing. No one considered Finland anything on the international stage. And then Lauri Markkanen entered the University of Arizona, and all of a sudden they skyrocketed in talent, as Markkanen just plays like a monster on the FIBA stage. And there was initially a little bit of worry about his readiness for this tournament, given that he had to, unfortunately, but also it's just the way of this country, he had to enlist in the military over this past summer, so people were kind of on the fence of, well, how prepared is he going to be? Is he actually playing basketball every day, or is that being completely put on hold? And some people weren't even sure if he'd compete in this tournament, but here he is, he's looking great, and I think Finland's going to be pretty good. Now we're up to number 9. I'm not quite at the medal or bust teams, but we're pretty close. Brazil made some noise in their tune-up games. They took down Australia, which is very surprising considering Brazil, I don't think, has a single active NBA player on their roster. They have Raul Neto, who very recently has played in the NBA, but beyond him, you know, Marcelo Huertas, they have Cristiano Felicio, Bruno Caboclo, like they, Lozada, who's playing in the G League right now. They have dudes who can play and are very close to NBA talent. Brazil used to be one of the top 5 countries in the world when it came to basketball. They kind of went through a pretty steep decline in the 2010s, but they have gone right back up here in the 2020s. And I think Brazil, they're a dark horse team to keep an eye on in this tournament. They've got a moderate opening stage. They have Ivory Coast and Iran, 2 teams they should beat, but then they have Spain, who maybe not going to beat them, but they'll still move out of the first round, which is good. Moving up to number 8. At this point, I'm going to confidently say we are at the medal or bust teams. Like, these are teams who are coming in because they want to medal. If they don't get top 3, they're going to leave disappointed. So, Germany at number 8 is a powerhouse. They are led by Dennis Schroeder, who maybe doesn't get a lot of respect in the actual NBA, but amongst the international stage, he is just a point god. He is someone who can just control the game like a puppet master. He is so sharp with the ball. He's faster than most international guards. He can shoot, he can attack the rim, he can play make, he has a ton of confidence, his defense is spectacular. Dennis Schroeder is a very good international basketball player, and he's not even their best player. Franz Wagner is someone who's going to lead the team in scoring, he might lead the team in assists, he's going to rebound a bit, and he's going to be a problem on the defensive end thanks to his NBA size. He's going to be great. And then we're still not even done. They have Daniel Theis, who is pretty much an afterthought in the NBA, but Daniel Theis is just a scoring machine in FIBA. He has that 10-foot and inside shot down to a T. He is so sharp on the inside, and he's strong, so he rebounds, and he can just get in the way of people driving. He might not block a lot of shots, but he's going to contest every shot that comes up around him. So keep an eye on him, and he's not even... Then you have Mo Wagner, the backup center. Another NBA experienced player who's got NBA size, NBA athleticism, who can get it done. Isaac Bonga is also on the team. He has some NBA experience. I mean, my goodness, this German national team is good. and they've played really well in their tune-up games. They beat Canada, I believe. They had a loss and a win against Canada, so they can hang. Keep an eye on Germany. Finishing 7th, I'm going Lithuania. Lithuania had a pretty abysmal Eurobasket last summer, but and honestly, like, their roster doesn't look as good this summer. Domantas Sabonis, who is hands down the best player in Lithuania, is not playing. But they still have Jonas Valanciunas, Domantas Motiejūnas, Mindaugas Kuzminskas, and Brazdeikis. I don't know his first name. Ignas, I think. They have a lot of dudes who can play in the NBA or at least dominate the European game. And then there's dudes who, I haven't mentioned, who don't necessarily have the size to get brought over to the NBA, but do have the skills to play in the NBA. I think Lithuania is a powerhouse of the European game, and they're such an interesting country because it's such a tiny little country, and yet, my goodness, they just make the best basketball players. So watch out for Lithuania in this tournament. Finishing 6th, and I might be wrong on this, but I'm going Slovenia. Slovenia is a one-man show. I don't mean to be offensive to the rest of their team. Luka Doncic is phenomenal. He is just leaps and bounds. He's one of the best players on the planet. He might be the MVP of the NBA this upcoming season. Like, he is just so talented in every regard. He is the best player in this FIBA tournament. I'd say he's my favorite to win the FIBA tournament MVP, unless they just automatically hand it out to the gold medal best player. I don't know how they do that, but Luka has a good case at being the MVP, or at least being on the first team. And, I hate to say it, so like it's Luka or nothing, but the rest of their team, if you removed Luka, they wouldn't even be in the top 10. That's how much of a fall off it is. But still, Slovenia, they have a lot of experience playing together, which is another underrated aspect of these international tournaments, is countries where the same guys are playing in all the tune-up games, and they're playing in Eurobasket, and they're playing in the World Cup, they play in the Olympics, they all play together pretty much every time with very little roster turnover. I think those countries perform better, so watch out for Slovenia. Finishing 5th, we're going France, and France is gearing up because they are going to host the Olympics next summer. So, like, they are showing out for this tournament. There are NBA caliber players who were cut. I think Ntilikina was cut from this roster just a little bit ago. They've got Rudy Gobert, one of the best defensive centers in the NBA. I know he is just absolutely picked on relentlessly online, but Gobert is good. Evan Fournier plays really well on the international stage. Nando De Colo also can hang in the international stage and has NBA experience. Nicolas Batum, he's a point forward who gets it done. Gershon Yabusele, he's got NBA experience. Bel Elia Kobo, he also has NBA experience. And these dudes play well together. These are dudes who represent their national team every single summer. They have to make the team. It's not just oh, you have international cred, you're on the team. No, these dudes have to try out and they have to make the team. I think France is a powerhouse. They have a really, really good case at medaling in this tournament. But they're not in the top 4. Finishing 4th, I'm going with Spain. Okay, the Spanish national team is another team kind of like China, where they were at the very top of the world, then they fell down pretty steeply in the 2010s, but then they've climbed right back up here in the 2020s. They actually won the last World Cup. They were led by Ricky Rubio and Marc Gasol, two guys who have since moved on and retired from the international game, although Rubio might make a return for the Olympics next summer. They are led by Juancho Hernan Gomez, his brother Willie. Oh, Alexia Brines, he's played in the NBA. Salty Aldama, he's got NBA experience. Usman Nugaruba, he is recently drafted, I believe. And, those are just the dudes who are NBA experienced. The actual dudes who play for the Spanish league, which is the Liga ACB, I believe. That's one of the highest leagues in the world. They have Victor Claver, I believe, is a dude on their team who has a lot of international experience and is a very well respected. Sergio Llull is another guy. Rudy Fernandez, this dude's still playing. My goodness, he was born in 1985. That means he is, what, like 38 years old? That's amazing. This is a guy that when I was like a little kid, was watching play in the NBA. The Spanish national team is decked out. They are good. They are really stinking good. And they've already got some impressive tune-up victories under their belt, so watch out for them. Finishing 3rd, I'm going with Australia. So we're at the meat and the potatoes here. Like, this is the best. The top 3 countries here any of them could win. I think Australia is absolutely stacked. They're led by Josh Giddey, who is a triple-double threat in the NBA, but it's not just the Josh Giddey show. They also have Jock Landale, who had a very good season in the NBA, Matisse Thybulle, one of the best defenders in the NBA, Patty Mills, a legend on the international game, playing point guard for the Australia national team, Joe Ingles, the veteran, experienced role model, just get it all done type player, Josh Green, one of the rising stars on the Dallas Mavericks this past year, makes his name on the defensive end especially. Chris Golding plays actually in Europe, and he has a lot of experience in the NBL. He's really good. I think he has some NBA experience. Dante Exum was a lottery pick, kind of fell off, but then he's slowly risen back up as a valuable role player. Dyson Daniels, another NBA experienced player. Xavier Crooks, another NBA experienced player. Jack White, another dude who has a little bit of NBA experience. My goodness. And then you got Nick Kay. Can't forget him. NBL, he's a star in the NBL. He's actually now playing in the B League. This is a really good team. I just went through their whole roster because I just kept seeing names I recognize, and that's impressive. When your entire team is NBA caliber and you're not named the United States, that's a sign that you got something going on. Finishing second, I'm going Canada. I know they're the fun one to rank number one, but I just can't. I hate to say it. I'm going with Canada at number two. They've got a lot of really, really good talent. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is probably like the other guy who's going to compete with Luka Doncic and Lauri Markkanen, now that I think about it, who could be the tournament MVP. But it isn't just the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander show. They've got RJ Barrett, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dylan Brooks, Lou Dort, Zach Edey, Dwight Powell, Kelly Olynyk, and then they've got some dudes who play internationally, Kyle Alexander, Trey Bell Haynes, Melvin Ejim, and then a couple dudes who, it's kind of weird, they play in the Canadian League, which is not a respected league at all, but okay, Philip Scrubb and Thomas Scrubb. They might be brothers. I'm looking at their images, they look kind of similar. If they're not brothers, then I apologize. I don't know who those two men are. I really like this Canadian national team. They've made a lot of noise in their tune-up games, so they are the popular pick for those trying to predict who's going to win the World Cup. But I don't have them winning because, unfortunately, the United States of America still exists, and my goodness, we have some pretty good basketball players on our team. A lot of people were ripping apart the NBA roster when it was announced because they would bring up, well, why is this guy on the team when this guy is a better NBA player? You know, where's Stephen Curry? Where's Damian Lillard? Where's LeBron James? The reality is that the absolute cream of the crop just isn't interested in playing, / those who are in control of the United States national team at this point have a different mentality when it comes to preparing a roster for these tournaments. You see, the previous mentality was just make an all-star team of the best NBA players, roll out the ball and watch them play open gym basketball and win every tournament they play in. And for a while that worked every single year. But then it starts to get a little stale, I guess you could say, because you just have a bunch of number ones on the court. None of them know how to play off ball. None of them are necessarily great defensive players. None of them are great at creating shots for others, unless that's their whole shtick. So you have this extremely talented team who loses to Argentina, who loses to Puerto Rico, and goes through some really dark times in the mid-2000s. And then they kind of got their act together. They're like, oh man, we actually have to like prepare for these tournaments. And they came back in 2008 for the Olympics and absolutely annihilated, and they kept that trend up. But then it slowly started to teeter off again. And in the last World Cup in 2019, they just got absolutely embarrassed. The Americans finished 7th, if you can believe that. And it was because they were the pizzazz of competing for the United States national team had worn off, so they weren't getting the cream of the crop, number ones. They were getting third tier number one options, and the third tier number one options playing pickup ball just doesn't equal success on the international stage. So what the Americans were trying to do this year is they wanted to put a team together of guys who are predominantly not number ones. Now, of course, they have Anthony Edwards, who is a number one. But beyond that, I guess Brandon Ingram as well. Beyond that, it's due to play roles. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a defensive-minded big. Walker Kessler is one of the best defensive-minded centers in the league. Austin Reeves is a do-it-all perimeter player. Bobby Portis does the little things and helped the Bucks win a championship. He's actually the only NBA champion on the roster. Cameron Johnson is one of the best 3-and-D players in all of the NBA. Josh Hart, another spectacular role player for the Knicks. Tyrese Halliburton, a great shooter and playmaker. Jalen Brunson, another really good playmaker who can get shots up himself. Mikal Bridges is one of the best 3-and-D players in the NBA. I know I just said that for Cameron Johnson, but Mikal Bridges is a tier above that. And then Paolo Banchero, honestly, is my biggest question mark as to why he was put on the team. Not to say he's a bad player, but he's not a great scorer, and that's kind of his only thing. So maybe he's blossomed a lot over the summer. I'm not sure. But even though like this American team isn't Stephen Curry, LeBron James, I think this American team makes a lot of sense. So that's why I have them at number 1, and that is why I have my entire rankings the way I have them. So thank you guys for watching this pretty long unscripted video. I may have talked out of my butt a little bit for some of that. I tried. I did a lot of research, but this is a very, very broad subject to do a video on. You're not an expert on the Venezuela national team, so don't act like you are, all right? It's impossible to be an expert on every single one of these teams unless I truly invested 40 hours into studying this, and I don't have time for that. I have a job, so thank you all for watching. Let me know down in the comments what you think, what you expect, how you think things are going to play out. Which teams did I underrate that you happen to know a little more about? And which teams do you think I may have overrated? Maybe I got tricked and I sipped on the Kool-Aid a little too much. Subscribe if you like basketball content. Look forward to my NBA preseason predictions, a tradition on this channel where I rank every single NBA team in 2 different videos, Eastern Conference and Western Conference going into the season, just giving you my thoughts on how I think they will finish the season. And I think that's just about it. I'll see you all next time.